Ask Tara and Jamie Anything. A podcast filled with surprises. Hello everyone, Tara Brabazon here, and I have a friend with me, a very close personal friend, Professor Jamie Quinton, and as always, I'm involving Jamie because we've had a great question, and I need to do a shout out to the legendary Very Panda Mood. VPM, I told you I would do this. I would summon Jamie and we would do this work for you. So you've got questions for me, but because most of these questions come from a particular disciplinary place, I wanted to involve Jamie because obviously I never did a postdoc. And none of my students, and there are hundreds of my students, have ever done a postdoc. But there is somebody who did a postdoc, and most of his students have. So, Jamie,
and I've hired postdocs, yeah.
Yeah, so can you, and of course you've hired postdocs as well, and of course as a head of school right now, you're involved in all sorts of negotiations around that. So, Jamie, are you happy to take some questions from Very Panda Mood?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now, Very Panda Mood has really asked some evocative questions, and that's why I'm just going to actually go through what VPM wanted for us today. And VPM asked us, is a postdoc still worth it? I think that's a great phrase too, still worth it in today's academic job market. Because obviously when we're saying worth it, you have to leave your family, leave your friends, take risks, often go to a new environment, sometimes a new nation. So is it still worth it, Jamie?
That's actually a really good question.
It is.
For a number of reasons, in fact. So, first thing is, we're living in a time where there is a bit of a de-intellectualization taking place. You've got people like Musk and others saying, why do we need degrees anymore?
That's right.
So a postdoc is challenging because, as you pointed out, there are a number of sacrifices you make to do a postdoc. I like to look at everything you do should be about building skills. So my question to you is, what kind of skills do you want to build? And I assume that people want to be gainfully employed going forwards.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge we have is the threat of, I would call them less educated people, trying to stop educated people from being in positions of being able to, control and do things. So,
make a living, show autonomy.
Sure.
Yeah.
So really the trade-off is one of patience. Do you want to gain more skills, or do you want to go out and earn lots of money? A lot of people are now making excuses of, a postdoc doesn't get me anywhere, I'm not going to get as much money, and so on. But when it comes to employability, you are employable when you finish your undergraduate degree, you're employable when you finish your PhD, and you're particularly employable under your own steam when you finish a postdoc or two. Yeah. So that really is the decision to make, right? You are gainfully employed as a postdoc. It's not that you're scrimping and scratching for every dollar that you get when you do a postdoc.
No.
But it does depend on what trajectory you want for yourself. So, ask yourself, where do you want to be 10 years from now or 5 years from now? And how do you get there? And if a postdoc is the way to do it, then you should think carefully about a postdoc.
Yeah, and if you're interested in research, it allows you to continue that research trajectory.
Absolutely.
Because what a lot of us who didn't go down the postdoctoral role or road, what we confronted was incredibly high teaching load. So we went into a very, very junior lectureship role, and it would be teaching only, education focused, or I wasn't in one of those. I was in an inverted commas balanced role, but it was a double teaching load. So we mustn't romanticise the alternatives to the postdoc either.
Sure. Well, it also depends on what you want to get out of a postdoc.
And that's actually Very Panda Mood's next question. And I love this. I think this was a great question. What should one aim to learn or achieve during a postdoc? I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So going into it, what are you aiming to do and get out of it? I think that's brilliant.
Can I congratulate VPM actually on thinking about that and asking that question? Because I do think, or at least in my experience, I think probably 80% of people who do postdocs don't actually consider that question.
No.
You do get out of a postdoc what you put into it.
Boom.
So, I in terms of what I'd like postdocs who work for me to do and what I did in mine, so I'm going to go to that data set of 1.
Yeah, that's right.
You do get out of a postdoc what you put into it. The difference between being a PhD student and being a postdoc is that as a PhD student, you have one project to focus on. And everyone will tell you it's the best time of your research life, right? Because you have that dedicated time, you can focus on one idea, and you pull in lots of other ideas into your synthesis of your thesis and your one idea, but you get to focus on one thing. Whereas once you've finished your PhD, you have to start juggling, right? You
never have that focus again.
You don't have the same level of focus. And then to make the most of a postdoc, what you want to do is, as I said, I see it as a skill building exercise. Build your skills, but then try to proactively diversify your skills.
Yeah.
So don't just treat it like I'm being hired to conduct a project, which a lot of postdocs are, right? You get hired to conduct a project, but you do have opportunity, and you have opportunity to get your fingers in other pies and get involved in other things. And the trick is to get the balance right? Because you're hired as a postdoc to do something. You need to have clarity with whoever you're working with on what that is.
What we describe in the literature as role clarity. You need role clarity, yes.
But look for opportunities. If try to do a little bit of teaching. If you're interested in an academic pathway,
yes.
Try to do some teaching. Try to add your skills to other projects, because the postdoc is when you start thinking about how do I fit into a team of people and help the team to thrive.
And also you'll get a chance to do a little bit of supervision. In the North American model, there may be some capstone work you can do. In the British, New Zealand, Australian system, there might be some honours supervision to do. I would really jump at all of that, because you rarely get a chance, and then suddenly you're in a balanced role, and that's an expectation.
Or if you're doing a postdoc and you think academia isn't for you, you might try some of these things and realise, look, I don't want to spend 40 years doing this.
Yeah.
Then you can also work on developing skills that are translatable into other areas you might want to step into.
I love this. Now, Very Panda Mood, again, followed up with another great question. You've made it very easy on me, can I say? Normally I'm writing these questions, and I am just reading the questions that you left in a comment, Very Panda Mood. The next question was, how important is it to choose the right advisor or lab? Now, that's a great question, because when you come from a panicked mode, so any job will do, you're desperate. When you're desperate, you just go, that'll do. It's lovely to have a choice. We've run a whole session on the post series about how to get a job, right? And it's all about choice. How would you enable people's choice between advisors and between labs?
Okay, so for lab-based work, well, it's important, but I want you, as someone who's thinking about a postdoc, to back yourself. You've done a PhD, or you're finishing a PhD, and you know the answer to this question because you've experienced it as a student. So what's, I guess, most important is how well you align your postdoc with the trajectory you want to create for yourself. And that might mean not having the optimal supervisor or the optimal lab, but it's a stepping stone that gets you where you want to go. But it is important in the sense of you need to be able to have as much autonomy as you can, or you feel you need, and be able to grow in the role, so that the next step after the role, you're enabled and empowered to take on. And so can I add a second piece of advice, which is, as a PhD student, if you're someone who's just starting a PhD, think about your PhD the same way. Don't sit around and wait for someone to tell you what to do. Try and work out how you can create a pathway to success out of your PhD that leads you to where you want to go.
I think that's strong. You're the one that taught me through our marriage to be crystalline about what success looks like. And I think you're great on that vista, on actually thinking about and trying to find a pathway.
Well, I want to sort of say something quickly about my postdoc. So I was very, very lucky that when I finished my PhD, I applied for 7 postdocs. I wasn't particularly keen on going overseas at the time. I'd never really been anywhere. So I was limited my comfort zone was very small, and it was limited by my life experiences before that.
Yeah.
But because in terms of the sciences, I was actually very successful in my PhD. I was quite focused and I worked pretty hard, and I had 9 first authored articles, which then it empowered me so that when I applied for all these postdocs, I was offered them all.
Yeah, wow.
And that gave me enough choice that I could then think about which one or which ones would actually lead to the best pathways. So there's a bit of that chicken and egg problem of I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to do something. And then opportunity. So it's a match between opportunity and planning. And so the postdoc I chose was the one where there was some element of leadership in the role. It wasn't just running a project. And so I was involved in other students' work, right? I led a group, synchrotron research. So I was involved in several student projects. I had a project of my own to run, and I became a rather important person in the lab.
Yeah.
Now, the lab itself had 4 other postdocs, so it was a reasonably well-to-do lab.
Yeah.
But my role wasn't so much about the lab, it was about the opportunity and the capabilities that I could help enhance in the role.
Now, the next question that VPM has asked, therefore, is how do you connect with the right advisor or group? So, in other words, you said you got 7? You applied for 7 for 7, hello. Yeah. So how the hell did that happen? Where do those opportunities come from for a young scientist, say?
So that came from knowing how to make the most of the networks that you have available to you. And that comes down to your ability to work with other people and your ability to communicate with other people.
Yeah.
It comes from going to specific conferences and meeting and proactively meeting people that you know will be helpful, who are experts in areas you want to either grow into or you can connect with, and fostering that relationship as early as possible so that when you come to asking what opportunities are there, you want people who will advocate for you and be willing to connect you with their networks. So it wasn't so much my network, it was my network's networks that opened the opportunities.
That's so interesting. And by the way, were examiners involved, because we're doing a lot of work on examination at the moment, were examiners involved in either that network or your ongoing network post the postdocs? I'm just interested, never asked you that question.
Yeah, no.
Or not really?
No, not really. I had 3 examiners.
Interesting. And
one of them was associated with my network, but the other 2 were people I didn't know, and one was international and one was a domestic, an internal Australian examiner, and I had nothing to do with either of those.
At the conclusion of the examination, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, at the conclusion of the examination, they then approached me and asked me if I was interested in doing more work, and one of them did, the international one did. But I didn't choose that option. I chose a different option.
But still, that makes the point I'm sort of making, which is you've got examiners, and actually if supervisors select examiners well, they can loan the student a network as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, especially the international examiner, they understood the significance of my work.
Yeah.
And wanted to get involved into it themselves.
That's tremendous. So that's important too. That's why examiner selection matters a lot as well, which of course dovetails with work we're doing on the channel at the moment. Now, last question from Very Panda Mood, and you rock, superstar. These were great questions. And again, I do not know the answer to this. I know what the literature is saying. The question was, how many years of postdoc experience are typical or advisable? And I'm just putting in the editorial commentary there that obviously the recent Nature articles about the postdocs becoming permadocs, the people in their 30s, even in their 40s, are still in postdoc after postdoc after postdoc. What's your vibe on years?
I was going to go there myself.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
No, it's okay. I was going to go there because that's the other end of the spectrum, right? Yeah. The perception of this person has just been doing postdoc after postdoc. Again, it goes back to that first question and the purpose of why you're doing a postdoc.
Yeah.
Yes, we live in precarious times. Yes, we live in de-intellectualized times, and so the academic workforce is now more volatile, I think, than it's ever been, really.
Yep.
And it's about resourcing. It's about the resources that are available.
Yep.
And as resources get less and less prevalent, it's going to become more precarious and it's going to become more challenging. And so I think we're now starting to see permadocs appear because they haven't got a choice.
Yeah.
And it just comes down to, I think, that forward planning of where do I want to go, and don't set your sights on one target. Give yourself multiple targets or a cluster of targets, and have your ideal target and work towards that. But then be willing to, create opportunity and roll with opportunities as they appear. Now, I haven't answered the question yet, so. In terms of how much time do I spend doing a postdoc, the ideal amount of time is possibly 2 postdocs, 3 to 4 years. When someone hires a postdoc, they really want the postdoc to be there for at least 2 years, because the first of the 2 years is coming up to speed and getting the know-how and getting that deep familiarity, so that in the second year they can be productive. And whatever you do as a postdoc, be as productive as you can be, because your track record, this is where you get your track record and make the biggest traction against your track record. Yeah. If you manage to do well, if you aim to hit, say, 5 publications out of a postdoc, a 2-year postdoc, then you're set up for what you want to do next. And what you can do is you can use a postdoc for any correctives that you might want to make out of what you might not have achieved with your PhD, or you want to create a trajectory. You want to show that with your PhD and your postdoc together, they're creating an arc that's going to take you forwards and show that you're building momentum in your research career. And again, you can step sideways. If you don't want to just keep going down that same trajectory, you can shift it. Yeah. And the idea is that the skills that you've shown and the outcomes, the publications or whatever success looks like in that role, if you can demonstrate that you've done a good job and you've tried to make the most of the opportunity, anybody who's looking to employ you in whatever you do next, your CV will say that. And that's the ultimate objective, in my opinion.
And final question, again, editorial from me. With the permadoc, so say you're doing, if I'm reading the research literature correctly, we're suddenly entering 5 postdocs.
Yep.
What happens then? Can you get off the postdoc train, or should you have earlier developed more teaching skills to gain a more balanced role?
So we're talking about someone who's planning to become an academic?
Yes, we are. Noting we're probably dealing with younger students, often in the sciences and applied social sciences, I think.
Okay. So when it comes to academia and the experimental sciences, the challenge that we have and why we have permadocs is because when you go for an academic position, there are a few things you need to be able to demonstrate that most people struggle with. Yeah. One of them is, if you're applying for a balanced role, if you have any teaching experience and you can demonstrate that you've taken a little bit of a learning journey as an educator, you will do well if you apply for an academic position. Yeah. Probably a half to 2/3 of people who apply for first entry-level academic positions and don't have any teaching experience, they're basing it solely on their research. That's the thing that makes the point of difference. Yeah. Yeah. For those that have 5 postdocs, when you go for an academic position, what you have to be able to do is demonstrate that you can come up with an independent research program and develop it from nothing into something. And if you're just going to keep doing what you've done before, then what you're doing is you're automatically taking something that another research group has already established and you're going to try and compete with it. So that is not as strong as I have a plan, I have an idea and I'd like to develop it into a research program. Yeah. So as postdocs, what you should try to do is look for opportunities for funding to do some pilot projects, some seed stuff. Nice. That probably should be relevant to the role and what you're doing, but allows you to demonstrate that you have some idea on how to develop new ideas and get some outputs and positive results from it.
So going into there having what I would describe as a side quest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for our colleagues in the humanities and the high theoretical social sciences colleagues, the version of that we deploy in our disciplines is you go into a North American interview after your PhD and they ask you, what's your second book? Right. And that question means your PhD is your first book. We know that. We take that as read. That's over. What's the next project? So always having some flesh on those bones, whatever the discipline, I think is a great one. Jamie, go, please.
Can I also try to do a forward plan concept for academics there, right? So think about, if you are interested in an academic pathway, when you become an academic, what would you like to be doing? Because you're going to need several of these if you're going to be really good at it. Yeah. And the challenge is to be able to be creative and look for opportunities and develop new ideas, but also get that balance right, because you can spread yourself too thinly and be involved in 10 projects and do none of them well.
Spot on.
So that's what the long-term... Think about the long-term plan and then reverse engineer the pathway to get there.
I think that's great. That's backward mapping a career. And again, that great phrase, role clarity. Jamie, you're legendary. That's brilliant. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot. And Very Panda Mood, what a legend. Thank you for that great comment and question. You've been just basically every second post that I do, you offer an amazing comment, and it's great to, within a couple of days, bounce straight back and give you answers to your questions. Take care, Very Panda Mood. Can't manage without you. Thank you, Jamie.